Hi, I'm Mark Coopersmith, and today I'm really pleased to have a conversation with Victoria Slivkoff. Victoria is the Global Head of Innovation and Entrepreneurship for the University of California System, and that's system-wide, working out of the Office of the President. She has visibility into what's happening at all of our campuses when it comes to these incredible topics of innovation, entrepreneurship, research, and so much more. So with that as a brief introduction, turn it right over to you, Victoria, to say hello and please introduce yourself a little more in your role.
Great, thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here. So my role at the UC Office of the President is to increase our capabilities to foster innovation and entrepreneurship, to promote economic growth and public benefit, and to create new opportunities for the UC community. So it's really leveraging the scale and diversity of our 10 campuses, 5 of which have medical centers, 3 affiliated national laboratories, as well as the UC system-wide agriculture and natural resources division to build this really engaging and vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. So part of my job is to stand up infrastructures that can foster the creation and sustainability of this ecosystem, which also includes gathering resources and partnerships that can further energize and build on all the great works that's already taking place across the campuses and the labs.
So the University of California system has been around for a long time, from the mid-1800s. And it's grown starting from my personal bias, right? Being a Berkeley grad and teaching at Berkeley. It started at Berkeley and has grown to all of these campuses. And as we take a look at kind of where we are now when we think about entrepreneurship and innovation systems and all of that and where we're going, share with us a little bit, maybe a touch of where we've come from to get here, where we are, and then your roadmap for the future in this role and kind of how you see it more broadly.
Yeah, I would say UC, as the largest public research university in the US, we're so prolific in terms of our research, our talent, and the intellectual capital of the entire system. So I would say over the last decade or so, we have experienced, and this is, working parallel with the growth of Silicon Valley, right, of the whole tech industry, that we've experienced this explosion of innovation and entrepreneurial activities across UC. So just to give you an example of the numbers of incubators, accelerators that we've had, 5 years ago, we had 25 and almost 30. And then now, 5 years later, we're clocking it at 60 incubators, accelerators. So that just tells you that, this has been so prolific in terms of the growth of this culture shift across all the campuses. And now this whole innovation and entrepreneurship culture is deeply embedded in sort of our day-to-days across the entire system.
So let me break in, and then I want to talk a little bit more about the future for a minute. So we've gone from less than 30 to more than 60 in less than 5 years. Has that been geographic growth in various incubators and accelerators and centers, or across the system, or have we gone into different sectors as well? You mentioned healthcare, for example, in your part of your introductory remarks. Have we gone deeper into some of those types of sectors?
I would say both. One is just, the sheer numbers that are popping up across the system on campuses and laboratories, as well as we've also developed some sector specific, healthcare being one. That's a big sector for us, as well as on your campus in Berkeley, you have now a blockchain incubator, right? So a lot of this new sector specific has popped up as well, that we're just seeing an explosion of new activities. And also that's why 4 years ago, President Napolitano decided to focus on this innovation and entrepreneurship initiative and establish the central office for innovation and entrepreneurship to increase greater coordination across our entire system as a variety of activities were popping up.
Right, which of course comes with its own set of challenges because, first of all, those of us at the University of California, by definition, are difficult to manage, and those of us with an entrepreneurial mindset are even more difficult to manage. I'm not sure exactly how you get this done. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Helping drive this coordination. Kind of within that backdrop of context, how do you think about, as we look at this roadmap, how do you think about innovation more broadly? kind of within the entrepreneurial mindset and driving innovation? How do you think about it and kind of the role that you have to help bring these different parties together to help make great things happen?
Yeah, so I'm really thinking of my role in context of UC's mission to education, research, as well as public benefit, right? So looking at, on one hand, point A, we have a tremendous amount of intellectual capital that rests across the system. And point B, how do we get to economic impact and public benefit? So really thinking about that, that transformational journey, and how can I make that happen? But more importantly, how can I do a really good job and increase efficiency to facilitate that transformation process? Yeah. And that could be in a couple of ways. So A, infrastructure. Do we have the infrastructures, right? Do we have the right, do we have the right support to open up more physical spaces across the system? Do we have support on the resources level? Are we providing enough funding, whether it's non-dilutive grant funding to help entrepreneurs get through that proof of concept, early stage, or investment capital, particularly campus-facing funds? And also the third prong of that is networking, right? Are we providing, are we bringing in the networks from industry, external partners, and different aspects of the external constituency to help grow that very productive ecosystem?
Yeah. When you talked about two things there in particular as you kind of began. One was economic impact and the other was public benefit. Sometimes some might say those are mutually exclusive. Others, and I'm certainly in the second party, might say you can absolutely do both. You can do well while doing good. How do you find that intersection? And then after this, I want to talk a little bit about social entrepreneurship. So think about setting that up as well.
I think you can absolutely do well while doing good. Social entrepreneurship was a rather early and novel concept, I would say 10 years ago, right? But lately, the recent years, you've seen a lot more funds dedicated to social entrepreneurship because it has been proven that doing good can be profitable. So I don't think it's mutually exclusive. In fact, lining well with UC's mission, I think we definitely need to look at what we do holistically to make sure that we embrace startups that are doing well and also startups that are doing good, right?
Yeah, so for me too, being a public university, the public benefit is kind of really baked into what it is that we want to focus on. From a little bit more on social entrepreneurship. One of the things that I find really interesting, I come at it initially very much from the business side, having been an entrepreneur a number of times myself. And as I've gotten more and more involved with social entrepreneurship, there are some of these questions about, well, is it bad to make money, for example, or those types of things? And my response is often, if you can create a sustainable ecosystem in environment or education or housing or whatever else it is that serves the community, then it doesn't require ongoing funding. Mm-hmm. So how do we seed some of those types of projects, those social entrepreneurship projects, with intellectual capital, with people, with networks? What are some of the things that your office can do to help with that? And I know I've got some social entrepreneurs that are going to be watching us that are really interested to understand how they can best engage.
Yeah, I would say nowadays there's so much focus on how can we work together to solve the world's most pressing issues, right? So looking at the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, these are really big focuses for not just university, but also private sectors alike. So I think a part of what we do is connecting the dots, right? Looking at what are the great things that the entrepreneurs are working on from the university side, and then connecting them with appropriate industry connections or foundation connections to help facilitate and then help move those solutions to market. So the attention is really spent on social entrepreneurship as well. And also along those lines is really thinking about how to democratize opportunities across different constituents and different sectors of our society, right? And then I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later is now we're in the middle of a pandemic, everybody's thinking about economic recovery, but can we build in to a culture where we're focusing on what does an equitable recovery look like, right? And that you have to work with social entrepreneurs. You got to work with your, underrepresented communities and underrepresented entrepreneurs in working together. So I think they're all really important pieces of this ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of a nice stepping off point to understanding what that ecosystem looks like at the University of California. And I'll seed this conversation, and maybe you can touch on a number. We have students, and we have researchers, and we have faculty that teach as well. We have partnerships, we have accelerators and incubators. We've got all of these different elements. Kind of share with us just some insights into kind of how those all contribute.
Yeah, so I think I have a really unique view sitting at the headquarter office of the president, because like you said, our ecosystem is so vast, right? And we have a number of internal and external constituents that we serve. So my office, our role is not to replace what you all are doing on the campuses. We're really a layer add. So it's additional layer of intentionality to increase internal coordination. Looking at how vast the system is, but it's the same for the Berkeley campus, right? Your ecosystem has grown tremendously over the last decade, and a lot of times we're looking at a very fragmented and silo ecosystem. So what I do is to introduce more connectivity on a UCOP level, on a system-wide level, so that colleagues can come together to share best practices and opportunities. And so that's on the internal side, but from the external constituents' point of view, that often it's helpful to have a point of contact for those partners who are not currently engaged with UC, or those who seek a multi-campus initiative.
Right. So people, and who might that be? Is that governments? Is that corporations? Is it researchers? I mean, you can be that point and help direct them and help engage. Who do you deal with from the outside?
Yeah, so I'll give you two examples, concrete examples. One is our office led the expansion of the Blackstone Launchpad student entrepreneurship program across the system. So that is a student entrepreneurship program that's funded by the Blackstone Charitable Foundation. So that's an example. Again,
and what do they do?
So they provide, basically based on their partnership with Techstars, which is a global incubator program, they fund a EIR, a program director on each campus, to connect student entrepreneurs with this Techstar global incubator ecosystem to introduce more global opportunities, right? To really take our entrepreneurs and introduce them to a larger network of mentors and opportunities, piggyback on the Techstar infrastructure.
Which is great. And the Techstar program is a great program. I mean, it's among, it's in that top tier of great incubators and especially accelerators.
Yeah.
So that came out of your office, some of that. We want to figure out how to engage, and kind of through that, it's both funding, but also access to this network. Is that right?
Yeah, so our role in that engagement is working out and negotiating the engagement agreement. And so that's the external side, but on the internal side, we convene our colleagues across the campuses to ensure that we're aligned in what we want to get out of that partnership. So it's really the convening aspect internally, and also helping to communicate, sort of advocating for what UC wants or advocating for in those partnerships. So that's an example. The second example is our recent collaboration with Samsung's Extreme Tech Challenge, which is a global evergreen competition to support tech for good. So instead of working with one or two campuses, Samsung's competition had a appetite to work with the entire system, and therefore it was more efficient in terms of working with my office, and then I can help promote this competition and promote this opportunity to across our entire system to our entrepreneurs, and not just entrepreneurs on campus, but also promoting it to off-campus network of UC entrepreneurs. They could be alumni that they're out there building incredible companies. They're never affiliated with our incubator accelerators. So really, trying to create a path to greater connectivity to a global ecosystem of opportunities, connecting strategic partners and funders and so forth.
Yeah, so, and for those watching, the Extreme Tech Challenge it was a great program. You were just part of the finals a couple of weeks ago on that. If you Google Extreme Tech Challenge Finals 2020, I'm sure you'll be able to find that link, and I'll provide it as well. It's about an hour-long program. You can see half a dozen or more really great tech for good companies that are kind of exhibiting exactly the kinds of attributes that Victoria is talking about. I want to shift gears a little bit. One of the things that we do across UC is we create amazing research. We create amazing science, and sometimes that science doesn't always have immediate commercial applications. Sometimes it may never really have great commercial applications. And we do have offices of technology licensing and things like that. We have professors and grad students and others that sometimes take those technologies through our incubators and commercialize them, but there's still so much there. How do we think about that? How does your office think about all of that intellectual property and how we can do what you said earlier, economic impact and societal benefit?
Yeah, I think we can think about some of the IPs that can perhaps be opened up for sort of open source development, right? Maybe it doesn't have any licensing value as there's not a lot of commercial viability, but we should open that up for entrepreneurs or people that are interested in taking that forward and try to go the direction of social impact, right? Not for profit. I think that's something that we should definitely be more intentional about, because this is really aligning ourselves with our UC mission for public benefit. And also in, pulling back a little bit, the UC system is the largest recipient of federal research funding. We alone, as a system, account for 10% of total research funding allocation every year. So we have an obligation to really take all that wonderful research and the investment, by the federal agencies and trying to move all that great work towards a commercialized space.
Yeah, yeah. Along those lines, we talk about ecosystems and kind of what comprise really strong entrepreneurial ecosystems. Within the University of California, we have a lot of those attributes, right? We have education, we have really smart people, both researchers and business leaders. We have places where they can do this. We have that right entrepreneurial mindset. We are democratizing access to a lot of this information, in part through what you and your office do. But one of the big things that all of these entrepreneurs always say they need is money. Right? It's about that funding pitch. It's about access to capital. And being a public institution, it's not like there's always money available for these things. So when we have entrepreneurs seeking funding, when we have researchers seeking funding, all of those elements, how do you engage and how are you thinking about also helping enable from that perspective, that pillar in our ecosystem?
Yeah, so there are three directions in terms of funding. So as I look at the roadmap for our office that was developed a year ago, funding is really number two in terms of priority after system-wide coordination. So how can we provide additional layers? So three directions. One is pursue state funding. Two is make greater connections to private sector funders, whether it's corporate VCs or traditional VCs. And the third is fundraising our own vehicles, such as a proof of concept grant program. So let me go back to number one, pursue state funding. So our office was successful in securing $22 million from the state legislature for 3 years ago towards strengthening the campus innovation entrepreneurship infrastructure. So a third of that money went into establishing proof of concept fund. A third went to creating physical infrastructures, standing up incubators, accelerators. As a good example for that would be a new wet lab that was established down in Santa Cruz called Startup Sandbox. And then the rest of the third of the money went into events, mentorship, and so forth. So that's a big avenue, but given that state funding is dwindling at this point, we really have to look outside, right? The second prong is industry connections, right? Connecting more VCs and corporate VCs to our ecosystem. So our office really shifted strategy. About 2 years ago, we were really focusing on helping individual startups. But since I took office a year ago, I really focused on partnering with our campus colleagues, such as yourself, and making those introductions to campus administrators because your startup's best, right? So by working with you, by making those introductions to you, the campuses own those relationships, and therefore you can continuously, feed your startup pipeline to the investors instead of, managing out from the UCOP because, I really believe in working together with my campus and lab colleagues to support your startups. And the third, the last tranche is really looking at standing up our own vehicle, such as a proof of concept grant funding to support particularly early stage startup formation or technology validation.
Yeah, perfect. I'm going to wrap things up a little bit, but you get the last word here. Everybody knows that entrepreneurs never pass up an opportunity to make a little bit of a pitch, right? So I'm going to close with a pitch and then ask you for your pitch. My pitch is to all of my colleagues and students and partners who may be viewing this. If you're thinking about doing something with the University of California or the University of California system in general or Berkeley, if you're looking for that right point of entry, Victoria and her office can really create those opportunities. And it's a lot of these public-private partnerships that I think may be some great ways to engage, including where Victoria was just talking about when it comes to, for example, connecting with all of the capital that's available in the private sector to help fund some of these initiatives that we are working on within the University of California. So I'm going to turn it back over for the last word to you, Victoria, as far as if there was anything that you were to ask our students, our social entrepreneurs, and our aspiring entrepreneurs and partners and business colleagues as we say goodbye, what might that be?
I would say, speaking to our entrepreneur community, I would say continue to network. Feel free to leverage my office to make those connections. I will continue to support all the great work that my campus and lab colleagues are doing on the ground and introduce more connectivity so that you are more connected to a lot of the resources that we can provide from UCOP. To the external partners, UC is a very welcoming place. There's no place like UC in terms of our, rich history in research, in innovation, entrepreneurship, enterprise, and also just the great folks that we have that we're working with. So we're always looking for great partners in working with you to translate all this wonderful groundbreaking research and trying to create economic growth as well as public benefit for all. So
what's the best way to reach you? Anybody that's dealing with me knows I can connect you, but just in case, what's the best way to reach your office?
Oh, so it's my first name, Victoria, last name, Slivkoff @ucop.edu. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Last thoughts? Anything else? I think that was a great close.
Oh, good.
Okay.
I think the thing that I really sort of want people to walk away with is equality. I think that, this is the perfect timing in terms of, social progress. I think we want UC to represent that we're the engine to drive not just economic growth, environmental sustainability, but also social progress. And I also think that's one of the reasons why it attracted me to UC, because that purpose to do something greater.
Well, coming from UC myself, in my house, we have a whole family of UC grads, my wife and me, and both of my kids from different UC campuses as well. So we definitely feel exactly the same way and have that warm spot in our heart for the multiple missions that the University of California has. Victoria, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.